use of the resources of the government and the office of the presidency for personal enrichment. This stuff that's already happening, that's a theoretical conflict of interest sometime in the future we should be. The stuff that's already happening is already breathtaking. I mean, it is one thing for Mr. Trump's daughter to have advised everyone how to shop her look from her clothing line based on her appearance at the nominating convention for her father this summer. But now her jewelry company has sent out this missive to reporters, Style Alert, about how you too can buy Ivanka's favorite $10,000 bangle from her Metropolis collection if you liked it when you saw her wear it on 60 Minutes in this news interview she did there with her father. At the government website set up by the Trump transition effort, the Meet the President-elect page, it used to be basically an advertisement for Mr. Trump's businesses. Quote, the Trump Organization owns some of the world's top properties, including the world-renowned Fifth Avenue skyscraper, Trump Tower, as well as Trump Park, Trump Palace, and then it lists all of his properties. And it just goes on and on. Mr. Trump also owns many of the premier golf clubs around the world, including the Trump National Golf Club in Westchester, New York, and blah. I mean, this is a .gov website. This is a federal government website. He's using taxpayer resources to advertise his real estate portfolio. Or he was for a few days. They took down that stuff from the Meet the President-elect page after getting some criticism for it. Maybe they were a little embarrassed by the criticism. I don't know. I can tell you they certainly didn't feel some hard and fast ethics constraint come down on them about using the government to advertise the family business, because still today, at the Meet the Future First Lady page, at their same government website, I kid you not, there it is. Mrs. Trump, quote, also runs her own jewelry line called Melania Timepieces and Fashion Jewelry and sells on QVC. So here we go. The presidency of the United States, the resources of the American federal government are being used to advertise the First Family's QVC jewelry line. Even news coverage of the president is being monetized by the First Family to sell their branded products. Thanks, 60 Minutes.
This be as informal as we can, a conversation with everybody in this room. I just want to mention that this week Ivanka was in Iowa promoting workforce and workplace issues. She was, if you saw some of the memes, she was out there vaping. We also, the secretary was also in Ohio this week, basically announcing a 50% expansion in apprenticeship financing, which is a big deal. So kind of want to just get into the Q&A aspect of this. I know a lot of you submitted questions online, and we'd like to start with Julia Nelson from Long Island, Kansas.
Nice to meet you guys. My husband and I are the 6th generation in our family-owned diversified agricultural operation located in north central Kansas. On the ag side, we raise cattle and hogs, have a row crop farming operation, grain merchandising facility, trucking company, and feed mill. And roughly these entities employ about 100 employees in our rural community. We also operate in the banking sector. We own 5 branches located in south central Nebraska and north central Kansas, and those branches employ about 85 individuals. With the new tax reform structure, we realized we were presented with a unique opportunity to invest in our most important asset, our employees. We felt that this was the perfect time to promote loyalty and ensure our companies have a competitive wage advantage from our top leadership to our entry-level employees. We issued $500 bonuses to all full-time employees, $250 bonuses to all of our part-time employees, and on the ag side, we also raised everyone's wage by $1 per hour. You know, between the $1 an hour raise that we issued and also the payroll tax reduction, our ag employees are taking home an additional $200 on average per paycheck, which is, you know, almost an additional $5,000 per year. And in our rural communities, you know, that makes a huge impact. And I guess, you know, I just wanted to say our family is very appreciative of the work that the Trump administration has done on tax reform and, you know, the opportunity it's given us to reinvest in our employees. My question to you would be, what elements of the tax plan do you believe will improve the job market for younger Americans?
Well,
first of all, thank you, and thank you for your comments. And thank you for your support of tax reform, and most importantly, thank you for your commitment to growing your business here in America, and investing in your workforce. We're seeing this for every large employer who is rolling out wage increases or bonuses and associating it with the changes made in tax reform. Hundreds of small businesses across the country are doing the exact same thing. So it has been incredibly gratifying to see in the earliest days of its implementation and having such a positive effect. So to your question about how tax reform is going to help younger Americans, I think multifold. People will be graduating into an economy where there are jobs and where employers are competing for talent. Wages are increasing for the first time after having been stagnant for several decades. So you're seeing wage growth, you're seeing competition for great and motivated and driven talent. You're seeing tremendous opportunity for students to go right into the workforce through training programs and apprenticeship, where they have the opportunity to become employed debt-free, and taking an alternative path to a traditional four-year college because of the opportunities that are available in the market and because of this administration's focus on skill development and training. And then I think you see the opportunity expanding for young people to be entrepreneurs and to really harness the innovative spirit that America is so known for, and create their businesses and become job creators through a combination of both tax reform, which is decreasing barriers to entry and creating incentive for people to take the leap, take the risk, and start an enterprise, but also through deregulation. The administration has aggressively been deregulating. We're keeping smart, practical, needed regulation in place. There is place for regulation, but we have been so overregulated. And even well-intended regulations often were poorly executed and had real consequence with a disproportionately adverse effect for our small business owners that can't afford the teams of lawyers and accountants to figure out how to navigate and manage them. So I think the combination of a booming economy with tremendous job opportunity and job openings, the investment we're making in skills training and workforce development to assure that the skills being taught in our classrooms, whether it's K through 12, post-secondary, or mid to late career worker retraining, align with the jobs that are in demand in the economy. Tax reform and deregulation is creating a climate that empowers all Americans, and certainly Americans in the first stages of their careers.
Thank you, and let me add a few words to that. First, thank you for investing in the American people, and thank you for having so many small businesses. I started to lose track. You said we do this and this and that, but you know, across the nation, more than 4 million Americans have already received a tax bonus. And that is real money to real people. And that matters a lot to them, but that also matters to the communities, because you mentioned, you know, a few hundred workers, and, you know, about, 5,000 more. Well, 5,000 times a few hundred turns into, $500,000 or more for that community. So that means that more individuals are going to get jobs in that community as restaurants thrive and other small businesses thrive. And so this has a multiplier effect throughout our economy that is powerful. Let me also talk a little bit about the tax plan, which was your question, because an area of this, of President Trump's tax reform that really excites me is the focus on small businesses. And so historically, small businesses have lost out. Somehow, large corporations might get their needs addressed, but small businesses can be forgotten. And small businesses are the engine of America, especially with new technologies. If you look at between eBay and Etsy and so many other places, there are now 20 million individuals that are accessing global marketplaces with very small businesses because of technology. And they are creating growth, and they are the ones that are hiring so many Americans. And so the president was adamant that this tax plan focus on the needs of small business. And the result is reinvesting in workers, like you did, reinvesting in that small business. And for every effort to grow that small business, then you're going to have even more and more individuals working. And so this is so important. Just yesterday, I read that the Federal Reserve decreased their estimate of unemployment again for the second time this year. So we're already at a 17-year low, 4.1% nationally. And the Federal Reserve was predicting it would fall below 4% this year. And now they're predicting 3.8% this year, and an even greater increase next year. Think about that. We haven't seen those figures in decades. And that's because of President Trump's pro-growth policies like this tax reform plan. So thank you for your question.
All right. Next, we're going to go to Ebonique Ellis.
Hi.
Hey, Ebonique. Use your microphone.
Hi, I'm Ebonique. I have a small business, and I'm a new entrepreneur. And so when I heard about the opportunity funds in the new GOP tax bill, I loved it, and I wanted to learn more about as this program is getting unraveled.
This is one of the elements, and there's so many elements of tax reform that we're all excited about. And just to dovetail quickly, I mean, 100% capital expensing for the first 5 years. That's major for small businesses who have to make large capital investments to get up and running, and is going to be incredible for the next generation of entrepreneurs. But these opportunity funds and the opportunity zones that, is anyone here from South Carolina? The great state. Oh, hi, Harlan. So Senator Scott was a great champion for opportunity zones. It was bipartisan legislation that was included into the tax reform bill, and it basically enables reinvestment in communities that have traditionally been underserviced. And how it does that is by allowing the states and the governors to designate 20% of the areas within their communities as these opportunity zones, and then capital that's invested in those areas, if it's reinvested in those areas, you can avoid the capital gains tax, so you can defer the capital gains. And what they're trying to do, and what we're trying to do with this legislation, and I think it will be enormously beneficial, is ensure that businesses that are creating wealth and creating growth in these communities stay in these communities and don't leave. And there is a flight towards, for startups, for venture businesses. There is a strong pull to leave certain distressed markets in favor of locations that have more opportunities to access capital and networks and mentors. So there's a tremendous pull outside, out of rural America and out of our inner cities to places like Silicon Valley or New York City or Boston. Actually, a full 3/4 of all venture capital funding go to those 3 states. Go to California, go to New York, and go to Massachusetts. 3/4 of all venture capital funding. So we're trying to create a cycle where people invest in communities and keep that investment in those communities. And we think the opportunity zones will create great opportunity for entrepreneurs and for investors to invest in areas previously overlooked. Thanks.
All right. We're going to go to Akesh. So, go ahead.
Thank you. Akash Chogley from Americans for Prosperity. My question is about the regulatory state. So this administration and Congress deserve a ton of credit for doing a really excellent job rolling back the regulatory avalanche of its predecessors. But unfortunately, as we know, not every administration is as aligned as this one is on reducing that problem. So are there any plans to work with Congress to actually change the regulatory process itself so that future administrations can't impose so many regulations with such ease and lack of accountability?
Let me answer that, because I think this is such an important issue. And let me talk a little bit about how we look at regulation as a backdrop. And so within this building is the Office of Management and Budget. And one of their jobs is to review regulations and to do a cost-benefit analysis on regulations. One of the concerns that I have is, as a society, we've started focusing so much on cost-benefit and the accounting that even before we get to how we roll them back, we need to ask fundamental principles. What about freedom? A regulation, even if it doesn't impose a cost, a financial cost on society, can impose a cost by restricting freedom. And so we need to start with the presumption that we should be free unless there is a good reason not to be. And ask, is this regulation restricting our freedom? And then we can do a cost-benefit analysis and say, what is the cost to the economy? And these are all very important. One of the related issues that we also need to focus about is rule of law. And here's why. If you look at what happened in the past administration, any number of regulations were enacted. And we're now seeing courts across the country say, overturned, overturned, overturned. I could list half a dozen that have now been overturned. But they have been in place now for 3, 4, 5 years. And so the difficulty is, if it takes 4 or 5 years to overturn a regulation that was enacted without statutory authority, we've got an issue. And this is really fundamental because the regulations get signed into law, in essence, right? Because no one's going to violate a regulation, so they almost carry the power of law. And by the time they get challenged in court, and by the time courts say, you did not have the authority from Congress to do this, it's almost too late. And so one of the interesting ideas, I think, would be to see if there is some way to have expedited review of regulations so that we can say early on, no, we did not have the power to do this. You cannot limit society's freedom in this way.
Naomi Rayo from OIRA, which is in charge of the deregulatory agenda for the administration and regulation in general, she set a goal of pulling back, and the president had challenged OMB and OIRA to, for every new regulation enacted, 2 would be repealed. We ended the year with, for every new regulation enacted, 22 were pulled back, which is amazing. And really, we're just getting started because there is a process. Just as there's a process to put a regulation into place, there's a process to pull that regulation back. But she is incredibly focused on this. All of our cabinet secretaries are incredibly focused and are constantly being challenged by the president. What regulations are affecting the American people that you hear about in your travels across the country? Compile them. Come up with a list. We won't agree with all of them, but a lot of them are really well informed by just the people on the ground, the everyday Americans, the everyday business owners who are feeling the consequence. So in almost every cabinet meeting, the president asks this question. He asked it of Secretary Perdue a couple of weeks ago. What regulations are affecting our farmers? How close are you to getting to a place where you're satisfied that we have the right regulations and we've repealed the wrong ones? So it is an enormous priority for the administration and will continue to be. I actually brought Naomi with me when I went to India for the Global Entrepreneurship Summit put on by the State Department, because I feel that regulation is so critical to entrepreneurship. They are so linked. And having her voice talking about the effects of prudent regulation and also deregulating was a critical voice to that discussion.
You know, my father was a small business owner, and he said he sold the business, and he's not in it today, but he said if he were operating today, he just couldn't in the regulatory environment because of all the restrictions. And this is one thing that the president has taken on, and in conjunction with the tax cuts, we're seeing businesses like Julia's and Ebonique starting up new businesses. So, I mean, these dereg and tax cuts do go hand in hand in this pro-growth, unleashing of the economy that we're seeing. A rising tide lifts all boats, and that includes the millennial boat. There's going to be more opportunity and more opportunities to start businesses, which I know a lot of the people in this audience are looking to do, are interested to do. And so with that, I'd like to go to Jared Meyer. Where's Jared?
Thanks for
Jared.
taking the time to be with us today.
Great name.
I know, yeah. I swear, I get so many Google alerts now from your husband. But anyways, I'm a senior fellow with the Foundation for Government Accountability, which is a group that moves individuals from welfare to work. And my question is, an increasing number of millennials want to work for themselves in the 21st century American economy. And these benefits of independent work are clear. You have flexibility, mobility, the ability to take advantage of new technologies. So what's the administration doing to help millennials achieve these entrepreneurial dreams that they have?
Well, let me address that in a very specific way. One of the challenges, I think, to sort of becoming an entrepreneur is it can be scary sometimes, right? You go to work for someone, you're getting a paycheck, you have benefits, where your health care is coming from. But if you're on your own, right? And I think sometimes we make that incredibly difficult. And let's take healthcare, for example. There are now 11 million individuals and their families that are working in small businesses or for themselves that don't have healthcare through their employer. And that's such a major issue because if you're thinking about leaving your employer to start your own business, for millennials, maybe a little bit less of an issue, but as folks start families, this becomes a major issue. How are you going to access health care? So the president is very, very sensitive about this and really wants to provide more opportunities for individuals to access health care. And so he's directed all the cabinet officers to look at how we can improve this situation. At the Department of Labor, we have proposed a new rule. It's called an association health plan or a small business health plan. And the concept is that entrepreneurs can get together in associations, and they can obtain health care through those associations. So chambers of commerce, associations of entrepreneurs. If folks are setting up an eBay store, maybe an association of eBay stores, to access health care. And I think this could be transformative because if we can lower those barriers to individuals going off on their own and sort of pursuing their dreams, to creating those small businesses, not only are you helping those individuals and their families, but going back to what I was saying before, as those businesses develop, they're going to hire more folk. And you're going to start seeing a multiplier effect throughout our economy. And that's why we're growing so much, because President Trump is very focused on unleashing the innovation that I think is inherent in this nation, and particularly, in the millennial generation that has so many ideas. Now, we, as members of the administration, need to provide the opportunities for them to implement those ideas by lowering the barriers to entry to become entrepreneurs.
Agreed, and I would just follow up with noting the great work being done at the SBA by Administrator McMahon. She started as a small business owner. She understands the challenges of growing a business. She's given great energy and tremendous leadership to that agency. And the mission of increasing access to capital, access to networks, access to mentorship for entrepreneurs is a mandate that she is deeply inspired by and is just really leveraging that agency to do incredible work. So just to give you an example, in 2017 alone, year over year relative to the year prior, she lent $130 million more to women-led businesses. So increasing lending opportunities, particularly to populations that have unique barriers, women and minorities, is a big focus of hers, but also creating opportunities to gain mentorship and to allow the SBA. They have these incredible entrepreneurship facilities across the country that can provide guidance. And sometimes for a young entrepreneur, especially so many women-led businesses, there's one employee, and that's the founder. So who do they go to get advice and feedback on a business plan? And the SBA has some great programs, and she's refining them and scaling them. She's also thinking about digital connections and the opportunity to use the SBA platform to provide programming and knowledge for entrepreneurs and feedback and networking opportunities for young entrepreneurs in leveraging technology. So the SBA is doing great work, and the administration is working very, very closely with Linda McMahon to continue to do that, so that as people start new businesses, they get the guidance and they have access to the capital needed to do so.
No, it can be scary going out on your own, especially if you just graduate from college. And so the SBA does provide tremendous resources for those willing to take that risk.
Their SCORE program's a great example of that, where they have real people who are experienced in those industries providing guidance and reviewing business plans and offering constructive feedback to entrepreneurs as they develop their plans and think about strategies for scaling their business. So there have been some very successful programs, and she is launching new ones and refining and enhancing those that exist that are providing a great service.
That's cool. David Grasso.
Hi, my name is David Grasso. I'm here representing a nonprofit that's dedicated to millennial economic empowerment. I have a live Facebook Live show on Bold TV, right here with Ms. Carey. We interview entrepreneurs, and a lot of times I see that not only do they face a lot of barriers to entry, and not only do they need mentorship, that's all important, but they're also tomorrow's job creators. And we have to see the link between entrepreneurship and jobs. So what is the administration doing to make sure that entrepreneurs not only succeed, but also create jobs?
Well, thank you, and I think we need to recognize that these entrepreneurs are the job creators. I often get a question: isn't changing technology going to decrease the number of jobs available? And I always say, people have been saying that for centuries, and every single time when technology changes, more jobs are created. And so you're seeing technology now empowering these entrepreneurs to access this global economy, to sell what they're producing and manufacturing, to access customers and clients over the internet to give advice. A dietitian in one state can now access, licensing issues aside, the entire nation. But I think there are a few areas where we need to look. We've already touched a little bit about lowering the barriers in terms of health care. We've talked a little bit about the tax issues and how treating small businesses in a more positive way is unleashing a lot of innovation among entrepreneurs. But I think we also need to talk about licensing. And let me tell you why. There was a time in the United States when most people didn't need a license to work. Now, almost 1 in 3 individuals need a license to do something really simple, to work. And so there's one city that I'm thinking about that recently licensed dog walking and dog sitting. And what I heard is this. What I heard is that there's an app. How many of you heard of the app called Rover? So you all know about it, right? Kind of like an Airbnb for dog walking and dog sitting. Well, right after Rover came out, all of a sudden they decided that only licensed individuals can dog sit. And so why are they doing that? You didn't need that for health and safety because dog sitting was safe for, pretty much centuries. You can babysit without a license.
Depends what kind of dog.
Depends what kind of dog. But why are they doing this? And so one of the things that I think is really important to empower entrepreneurs is to deal with this issue of occupational licensing. Why are we restricting competition? And that's such a hard issue because these are state and city and local issues. But we need to work with these localities because it is unfair, it is restrictive, and every time there is a new innovative idea, what you are seeing is a barrier to change. Folks don't like change. But there's so many ideas out there, and our economy is changing, so we should be embracing those changes. And at the Department of Labor, we're working with so many governors that are trying to really reform this occupational licensing issue. I think that's very important.
Secretary Acosta has been such an unbelievable, formidable champion on the issue of licensure, and it's gotten totally out of control. So I've got my master's degree from Secretary Acosta on this issue, and now I share his passion for it. But it really is remarkable how insane it's become. Now 1 in every 5 professions require a license. That was definitely not true 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. And it is disproportionately hurting those who can least afford it, and really putting a ceiling on people's potential for upward mobility. So it is a very serious issue. We've talked extensively about how to engaging governors, and the Secretary has done a great job in championing compacts between states in certain professions. For example, military spouses are a group that are disproportionately affected by the licensure problem because of the frequency in which they move. 92% of all military spouses are female. They move roughly every 3 years, and they're concentrated in terms of the jobs that they have in highly licensed fields such as education and the healthcare fields. And so it's enormously problematic, and as a result, you see a 16% unemployment rate of military spouses actively seeking jobs versus, which is, much higher than the national average. So thinking about how it affects individual groups such as military spouses and the population as a whole. But it's a major issue, and it requires us tackling it with the governors and with the state representatives, because most often this is happening on a state and local level. But we are bringing and elevating awareness around the consequence and how much this stymies opportunities, particularly those who need the jobs the most.
That's right. Let me add to that, if I could, because it's so important. Ivanka hosted a roundtable of military spouses to talk about this, and I want to share 2 stories. I was struck by one woman there who's an attorney, and when she moved, she was told that she should get a job at a store because she couldn't practice as a lawyer in that state. And she's invested a lot of time in that degree and a lot of money in that degree. And she moved. Do you keep your family unit intact and move with your military spouse? Or do you break up your family unit and keep your profession? There was another individual there who every time she moved as a school teacher, and every time she moved, she had to start at the bottom of the ladder and relicense. We talk about we need more teachers. So why are we making it so difficult for teachers to move? There's a third example that I became aware of that we're looking at, and it involves a dietitian. And so a military service member moved from one state to another, and the spouse is a dietitian, and she wants to continue providing diet advice over the internet, right? With email and FaceTime. You don't need to see people in person nowadays. But she can't do that because she doesn't have a license in the state that she's in. So she had a license in this state. She had clients in this state, and she cannot give advice to those clients. We've got to reform this.
Yeah, I mean, and not only does it take time, and it's a lot of money too, especially I was at that round table, and to get relicensed in another state, sometimes it's cost prohibitive. So not only does it discourage work, it becomes unaffordable to a lot of these families. We'll go on to our next question. Alexandra Baker.
Hi, and thank you for this opportunity to be here with you today. In 2016, I was inspired as I heard you fight to pledge to create a nationally paid for family leave program. And I stand with you in my belief that I think that this should be viewed as an investment in American families and not as just another entitlement. So my question to you, as a newly married woman in a room full of millennials who are all probably going to be parents in the coming years, could you please just speak about what you envision for this policy, and also talk a little bit about the legislative strategy that you plan to employ to build conservative consensus and support in the Senate?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question. So we are the only country in the developed world, and the only country in the world aside from Papua New Guinea, that does not have job-protected maternity leave in the event of the birth of a child. And this is a problem. This is a policy whose time has come and is in fact long overdue. So we're working with members of Congress on both sides of the aisle to create consensus and to create momentum for a plan, which will require compromise. It will require a compromise on both sides. It's been 25 years since FMLA was enacted, and we're still at 0 weeks of paid family leave. But, you know, I think when you think about this issue and you think about what's happening in our economy and the changing nature of our households, the reality is that 47% of the workforce is female. In the vast majority of homes, all parents work. The homes with children, all parents work. So the nature of work is changing, the nature of our homes are changing, and I think we have to be thinking about not only how we support the American worker, but how we support the American family and enable them to thrive, and that takes many forms. Paid family leave is critically important. And I do not view it as an entitlement either. I think it more than pays for itself by maintaining somebody's attachment to the workforce, by enabling them a short-term ability to bond with a child or an ill family member, and then return to their job and not fall off the track. And, you know, actually for the people who need it the most, they're the least likely to receive it. And oftentimes, after having a child, they'll go on a social welfare program because they can't afford not to. And that's far more expensive than a responsible national paid family leave program. So I'm very proud of the fact that this administration and this president put in his budget, in both of his budgets, an allocation for a national plan. That's the first time in history. There's never been one before, and we're working with members on both sides of the aisle to make it a reality and build consensus. But there is great momentum for this moving forward. A few other things that I would add to that discussion is also the importance of early childhood education, high quality early childhood education, and childcare accessibility and availability for working families and working parents. And that will be disproportionately impactful to women who are more likely to step out of the workforce to provide unpaid care, whether for a child or an adult dependent. So in tax reform, the addition of an expansion, the doubling of the child tax credit is something that we feel very, very strongly about and will provide real relief to working parents at a time when they need it the most, when they're raising children. The doubling of the standard family deduction, critical. The child or the dependent care credit for those taking care of adult dependents, that's a new credit that was created in recognition of the challenge of caring for an adult dependent and the strain that takes. But also in the Omni that came out today, something that the administration has been advocating very strongly for, there is a vast expansion of the child care and development block grants to the states. We believe that the states are best equipped to know which programs are working and support their workforces. But there was an expansion from $2.8 billion to $5.2 billion in this child care and development block grant. So supporting American working families and the modern American working families, supporting child care, investing in our children too, because being in stimulus-rich environments is so critical for their development. We spend so much as a country trying to remediate and trying to get a student on the right track when they've fallen behind, when they're in 8th grade, when they're in 9th grade, and they're not at the level they need to be. And we don't focus nearly enough on that really critical period between ages 0 to 5, where the parent who's often in the early phases of their career, has the least resources, has the least flexibility in their own schedule, and has the least options. So making sure that the child during that explosive period of growth and development is in an enriching environment, and that the parent has the support they need at those early stages of their career, we believe is very critical. So I am optimistic that we will accomplish the goal of creating a law and a national paid family leave plan. We're working very, very hard to do exactly that. But there are many ways in which we're supporting the working family through our administration's working family agenda. And some of it's being realized legislatively, and other actions we're taking administratively to do just that. So thank you for the question.
Let me underscore a few points that Ivanka made. First, Ivanka has been such a champion for this issue. She lives it, she breathes it. She has gone out of her way to research it, to advocate, to convince some that were skeptical. And she's made some amazing arguments that are right on point. And I want to start with one that I think we need to amplify. This is a conservative principle. We believe in families, and we believe that families need to be together. And what more can you do to support a family than give them the opportunity, when there's a baby in the household, to early on nurture and care for that child without it negatively impacting their career? We want that nurturing, but we also want to maintain that attachment to the workforce so that individuals can go back and work and produce. Now, from an economic perspective, if we are investing in individuals, what better individual to invest in than someone in their early years? Because if they're on the right path, if they develop and learn early on, that's going to pay back over a lifetime. And so a little bit of early investment is conservative and has an amazing return. And that's why this is such an important issue.
And it's quite frightening when you look at the data, because the fertility rate in this country has plummeted to an all-time low. We have the highest rate of SIDS of any country in the developed world. Most families don't have the luxury of taking unpaid leave, or it comes at a tremendous cost in terms of job loss or going into debt. So they're going back to work and oftentimes leaving their children in environments that are unsafe because it's the environment they can afford. In many states, daycare centers won't take a child until they're at least 12 weeks of age. So what is a family to do? Especially a single-parent household. So we really need to be thinking about how we support that infant and that child, and also keep the attachment to the workforce and enable somebody to continue their career. And we think we have some very creative solutions to do that in a fiscally responsible way.
Lauren Cooley for the next question.
Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm the Red Alert Politics section editor at the Washington Examiner, which covers higher education. I also have a college speaking tour called Make Campus Great Again. And lastly, I'm a mentor for a high school robotics team through the FIRST Robotics program. So clearly, I care a lot about seeing young people in America succeed. So my question, as the tuition inflation continues to skyrocket, how is the Trump administration making sure that the price of a college degree does not outweigh the value of that degree, specifically in getting a job in one's own field where they've actually had expertise and training?
It's a great question, and it's an increasing problem. Obviously, the price of college tuition has gone up dramatically over recent decades, yet we've been in an environment where there was less opportunity. That is changing now. This administration is growing the economy. We see it in GDP growth. We see it in wage growth. We see it in the growth of new businesses. Actually, in 2009, for the first time in history, there were more businesses that were closing than startups, which obviously did not bode well for the next generation coming out of college and into the workforce. But I think we're also thinking and fundamentally taking a step back and asking what is the end goal and what is the purpose of education. And the purpose of education is equipping somebody with the skills, both the EQ skills, but also the actual skills to secure a family-sustaining job and a career. And for a lot of people, that does not mean four-year college. And we're making it permissible again. We're talking about how there are many path A's depending on your own profile and your own passions and your own interests. And that's why we've been such advocates for technical education, vocational education, industry-driven apprenticeships, where people have the opportunity to learn while they earn and come into the workforce debt-free in a field that will enable them to be employed over the long term. We're creating those opportunities for growth through infrastructure. We're making sure that the apprenticeship opportunities and the workforce development opportunities align with the industries that need employees. You see a dearth of young people entering fields such as manufacturing. The same in the STEM fields. There just aren't enough graduates to go into the fields. So part of it is educating students about this is where we think the opportunity is going. This is what we think the work of the future is. So they can make wise decisions if they're going on to four-year college or beyond about where they are directing themselves and what degrees they're actually obtaining. But also we're opening up, we're hoping to refine and reauthorize the Perkins Act. We're hoping to extend Pell funding to shorter duration programs and to encourage dual degrees in high schools. The program that I visited in Waukee, Iowa was absolutely incredible because you have these juniors and seniors and they're getting real life work experience and then going and working for the same employers who designed the programs that they were training in. So I think making it permissible for people to go a route other than just four-year college will be very helpful. And then ensuring that people are educated on the job openings that are available. There's a lot we can do with big data on this front. I mean, really, we haven't leveraged data enough to show people where there are job vacancies and therefore, and what skills training programs they need to fill those jobs or what requirements are available to fill those jobs. So we're working on leveraging big data to do that, but we think that there's tremendous opportunity to better align those skills with the jobs that are available.
Secretary, do you have anything to add?
So let me embrace all of the points that Ivanka made. She and I have worked very closely on these issues. They're incredibly important. And let me try to personalize it to all of you in the following way. How many of you have done or know someone that has done a semester abroad? Okay, just about everyone in this room. Now I want you all to think about everything you learned on that semester abroad. If you want to be a police officer and you're studying criminology, why can't you do a semester at a police academy for credit? Are we really saying that you would learn less by doing a semester at a police academy? I'm not criticizing one. I'm just talking about providing optionality. And I think we have isolated education from the workforce. And so what we've talked about is demand-driven education, right? Education that responds to the skills that are being demanded by the workplace. And young Americans deserve to know in high school, if we want to follow this career path, this is our job opportunities, and this is how much we might make. This is the amount of loans that we'll have, and this is the debt. Or we can follow this other career path where we'll have a job more immediately, where we may not have debt. And later on, we can perhaps pursue other things. perhaps pursue that college degree. Or perhaps that degree should have in it a skill component, right? There is nothing to say that you can't learn and earn simultaneously. Yet somewhere along the way, we have said that education should be isolated from the workplace. And there's no reason, if you look at Europe, if you look at so many nations, they have integrated it through apprenticeship programs. They've integrated it through certificate programs and shorter duration programs, like Ivanka mentioned, which is why this administration is looking to expand Pell to those. And, you know, this is not that unusual. What happens in medical school? Someone learns anatomy and they learn to tie a knot. So why can't we apply that across the board to all professions? Why can't we have apprenticeships? Why can't we have semesters in the workforce for credit? And just give individuals the full array of options.
And what we're also seeing is that people who experience an apprenticeship program are much more likely to work in that field. So, for example, 50% of women who graduate with a degree in STEM don't end up going into a STEM field. If they've had an apprenticeship, that number goes up to 95%. So attaching the education with a real work, real life application is proving to be very, very effective in terms of creating that link between education and workforce, education and labor that has been so sorely missing. So you're right. Europe's given us some great examples. Switzerland has been great on this front. Germany, a full 1/3 of the German workforce goes through a formal apprenticeship program, and we've learned much from them. And Secretary Acosta, Secretary DeVos, Secretary Ross from Commerce, we've all worked very hard to think about how we can bring these industry-led credentials, create these industry-led credentials to expand apprenticeship in a model that mirrors what they're doing successfully overseas. And we're just at the beginning of that, but have been driving it very, very hard. And the task force you've established on this front is doing some excellent work that is very scalable. So we're looking forward to creating many, many more opportunities through that in the months and years to come.
Well, I think we have time for one more question. We'll make it quick. Justin Dent.
Hey all, thank you for a wonderful conversation so far. I'm the executive director of an organization called Generation Financial Knowledge Development. We work across the country teaching students the skills they need to thrive in 21st century careers, which we so often know they don't really get in college. We've done a lot of work with students across the country on their economic sentiment, and we found that while economic sentiment among millennials has greatly improved under the current administration's policies, millennials are still having a difficult time finding jobs and the jobs that they want. More than 20% of millennials still say they have difficulty finding jobs, and according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, millennials are still 50% more likely to be unemployed than similar cohorts 35 to 54. So my question for both of you is, what is this administration doing to pursue more pro-growth policies for jobs directed towards millennials? Thank you.
Well, I think President Trump's priorities on this are pretty clear. Jobs, and then even more jobs. It's crystal clear. And let me say, there are 6.3 million open jobs in this economy right now. The jobs are there. The unemployment rate's at 4.1% and dropping. The issue, and I want to bring it back to the education system. I had the privilege of speaking to the boards of trustees of a large state university system recently. And this state's doing really well. It's number 2 in the nation in terms of college graduation rates. 68% of students that start in this state graduate within 6 years. Number 2 in the nation. And of those, 63% find a job that pays decently. Number 2 in the nation. 68 times 63 is less than 50%. So here's the question. are universities teaching the skills that are being demanded by the current workforce? Are universities serving the students well? And so this cycles back to working with the universities and the colleges and those institutions that are offering skills to ensure that when you sign up, you are told you can follow this career path and these are your job options. You can follow this career path and these are the even better job options, and you can follow this career path and you're going to do really well. Now choose. And unfortunately, that emphasis on preparing individuals for family-sustaining jobs is not out there. And so the economy has the jobs. And I'll tell you, employers, job creators are asking us, where can we find individuals to hire? The issue is, are individuals being given the opportunity to acquire those skills? No, actually, that's not the issue. The issue is, are individuals being given the information that they need to choose the right opportunities to acquire those skills? And that's where I see that we need a lot of change.
And I'll just layer a couple more things onto that. I think licensure, again, is a big issue because we have these job openings. We know that we don't have enough welders. And yet there are welders in the country that are unemployed but can't move. So, you know, the licensure issue is problematic in this regard because the workforce often can't move to where the work is with great ease. Another challenge in mobility in this country is the cost of childcare. A lot of people are unable to move away from their communities because if their mother-in-law isn't in the neighborhood, they can't afford the cost of childcare to and be able to have a dual income household. So that is another barrier. Opioids is another major barrier. When you think about the jobs that are going unfilled in this country, and I believe that you have a panel that's going to be addressing exactly that. But many of the job openings that are going unfilled is because people are failing their drug tests. And we're seeing this, and it's devastating, the epidemic. We have the highest rate of unemployment for prime-aged white men that this country has ever experienced. And a lot of that is the opioid epidemic. So thinking about that in conjunction with skills training to make sure that we are training for the jobs that are available as opposed to educating and then hoping somebody gets a job, with policies that support families and enable both parents to work if they so choose.
Well, I want to thank you both. This has been a very informative panel, and you're so passionate about what you do, and I'm sure that, let's just give them a round of applause. Thank you, Kelly. All right.
Thank you all so much. It was a great group.
Thank you for the questions.